Story 1. AITA for assuming the worst with my narcissistic mother? Some brief history. I grew up with a narcissistic mom and an enabling dad, and it only got worse as I got older. There was a lot of yelling and anger and psychological games during my teenage years that has left me with a lot of issues that I am trying to overcome and heal from now in my adulthood. It wasn't long ago I moved out. It was maybe a little over 2 years ago. I am 20 years old now. I went no contact with my mom last summer after trying to stand up for my little sister and her mental health, and I got kicked out of the house and the police threatened on me if I tried to talk to my little sister. I didn't speak to them for 6 months, and the only reason I came back was so I could interact with my sister again. During that time, they decided to do therapy with my little sister and take some communication class of some sort. I thought that was great and would result in the changes I've been waiting for, but when my mom took me out to lunch to apologize, I was expected to leave everything in the past. I was told it wasn't all bad, and the whole conversation felt like pointing a finger at me while taking a minuscule amount of responsibility and telling her she loved me a bunch. There's a lot that happened in the past and a lot of traumas and situations that happened that I know for a fact won't be apologized for or seen as wrong. I have since moved across the country with my husband for Air Force. My move happened to land on the week leading up to Mother's Day weekend, and I was so busy with the move and trying to figure everything out that I forgot to text her, and honestly when I remembered just chose not to, because if I'm being honest, I don't feel that motherly connection to her. I wish my dad a happy Father's Day this last weekend, and he texted me asking why I didn't wish Mom a happy Mother's Day. I confronted the situation and asked if he was asking for her and if she was angry, because if she was, she should talk to me herself, and not even 5 minutes later she sent me a text saying she loved me, and it did hurt, but she didn't rant or was angry, and she told my dad not to say anything. I feel as though she told my dad not to say anything so I wouldn't catch on to the game and say something, or for her not to confront me. I didn't respond to the text, and she tried to call me today, but I ignored it. I don't know what to do in this situation. I've considered going no contact again for my own mental well-being. Only reason stopping me is I wouldn't be able to contact my little sister, probably again. It all feels so conflicting, and I feel like the asshole when she is kind, but I know that every time she's been kind and loving, she does something again that hurts me again. Am I the asshole for not wishing her a happy Mother's Day but wishing my dad one? Am I an asshole for assuming the worst from her? I still have nightmares about her weekly, if not nightly. And I'm seeking going back to therapy to deal with the healing. I need some hard truths. Story 2. AITA for how I reacted to my mom. My 28M mom, 60F, and I have always been on shaky ground. She had a job in the Middle East when I was 15 and took my sister with her. Later I'd find out from Dad this was because she couldn't stand being around him when he had to be on dialysis. That experience made me very close with Dad though. After she came back, she still appeared to care, but every now and then the facade would drop. Even when growing up, she'd pop off for no reason to the point of bashing and throwing things. She was always very critical about things that didn't involve her, even when I'd tell her point blank it wasn't what I needed. She refused to let me stay with them during COVID lockdown, but enthusiastically invited my sister and more or less ignored me when my GF of 5 years broke up with me. After her mother died, expectedly, all these toxic traits got turned up to 11. Last Christmas I came and stayed with my parents. Everything went okay until Boxing Day morning. While we were out at a cafe, Mom was talking ad nauseum about her friends' kids and all the ways my sister and I were so much more successful than them. I jumped on LinkedIn and found that one of them was CTO of a 3-person startup and had a chuckle at the pretentiousness. She didn't get it though, and before I could explain she went off at me yelling she didn't want to know, that demanded I tell her what else I'd read, then stormed out of the cafe with Dad in tow, presumably doing damage control. I did Boxing Day sales on my own and decided I'd had enough of being treated like this, the criticism, the anxiety of just being in her presence, the way she'd terrorize me and everyone else, then flip back to caring figure just enough so we wouldn't alienate her. And the fact that I seemed to matter to her is something to brag to her friends about. So I told Dad I was cutting her off, explained why, then left and blocked her number. I still see Dad when I'm in town. We don't talk about it, but I got a note from her explaining that her friends are just her kryptonite without actually apologizing for anything. I sent her a text laying it out that it didn't excuse her misdirecting her rage at me and that she hadn't actually apologized. At a funeral for my great-aunt, I made it very clear, through body language, that I fully intended on avoiding her. Afterward she waited until everyone was crowded around, then out the blue ambush hugged me, and I pretended to engage so as not to make a scene. Later my uncle told me I needed to apologize to her for his sake, as she had apparently been taking it all out on him. I texted her after saying the hug it was unwelcome and next time I'd let the scene play out. And the way she was treating her brother was a perfect example of why I was avoiding her. Now I don't talk. I'm on the fence about the severity of cutting her off though, and sometimes feel like an asshole son for not just dealing with it, at least for the sake of the other people in my family. So AITA? Story 3. AITA, Mom asks for money, doesn't live within her means. My mother, who retired last year, lives on Social Security, a pension, and a 401k. Prior to retiring, I offered to help her with budgeting, but she refused. She does not have a savings account. Every dollar that comes in is spent. Now that the realities of retirement have set in, she's begun to regularly ask to borrow money from me, which she never pays back. She's living beyond her means, because she wants to live on a small farm with a horse and donkey. She nickels and dimes herself to death to care for these animals, keeping up her house. She lives alone, and mowing the 5 or so acres that she has. In 2008, she filed for bankruptcy. She was forced to sell her horse at that time. But she pulled some mischief and sold it to a friend and then bought it back. Over the last 40 years, I know that other family members and friends have helped her time and time again by loaning her money and helping her create a budget. She just never sticks to it. She is very non-strategic with money. For example, she buys her groceries at the most expensive stores. She breaks and buys new cell phones regularly. She doesn't ever shop around for bargains on anything. I've loaned her money in the past, but I think I'm finally at the breaking point. I don't have that good of a relationship with her, and I haven't lived at home for more than 12 years, and I haven't accepted money, outside of a Christmas gift, for 20 years. If and or when she eventually cannot keep her lifestyle, she will probably break down. It might even kill her. This is why I've helped more often than I wanted to. But it really bothers me that she won't even attempt to live within her income. Am I enabling her? Story 4. AITA, for telling my mother I don't accept her apology. So, to preface this, I'm 16, NB, and I'm in year 12, which is the year before final exams to get into university. My parents got divorced almost 7 years ago, and I split my time 50-50ths. In order to apply to uni in the UK, you have to go through UCAS, and they need your GCSE grades. So, my careers teacher, who I'll call Mrs. Name, emailed my mum, 45F, to ask for them. She didn't send the correct thing over, so Mrs. Name asked me to ask my mother for the correct thing. At the same time as this, my dad texted me to ask my mum if she could send me a picture of my passport. He'd already emailed her the day before, but she hadn't responded and he needed to book the tickets. So I go, cool, no problem, and text my mum to ask for both things. Being as apologetic as possible about it. My parents have a very strained and practically non-existent relationship, and my mum gets very standoffish about requests from my dad and vice versa. She responds with "I've already done it" to the JICE question, and ignores my passport request. I say that Mrs. Name said she hadn't, and could she just double-check. I left this text conversation for a while I went and chatted with a teacher about coursework. She blew up at me, accusing me of calling her a liar, saying that she had dropped everything to help me. She had gone out of her way, she couldn't believe that I was being so hurtful, etc. I didn't respond and she sent a text in all caps basically cursing at me and telling me off. I still didn't respond because I didn't know what to say. Later on, she sent a text saying, "I'm sorry I felt hurt," and I responded with, "I don't accept your apology." She blew up at me all over again, saying she had wanted a reciprocated apology. That I was selfish for not accepting a genuine apology, and that she had had good reason for yelling at me before. I still haven't accepted her apology, and I left her on read.